We had a Tuesday treat last night in the form of Man City 2, Aston Villa 1.
Little Tuesday touch-up.
Yeah.
Yes, we did. And I don't know, it's funny. It's one of those games because this is the sort of point of the season where they fit in all the games that can't be fit in elsewhere because the schedule's so mad. This game didn't really have the sort of build-up that it should have had for a game of such importance. It just popped up on you, just like this. And it was really absorbing and worthwhile, I think. Not only was it an important game, but I felt properly implicated in it.
Yes.
It was really worthwhile. And there are a lot of Manchester City games where you spend time thinking, okay, is this the point where they're going to come back? Or are they ever going to come back because this is so far off Manchester City? But this was a Manchester City game where, and you could see the way, I suppose, in which Guardiola reacted at the end, which obviously there's the baggage of the season and all the rest of it. But this was such a game that was so valuable and played as if it was value in itself that it was just, okay, City have got an objective and they worked to it and they achieved it. And how many times have you felt that about Manchester City this season?
Yeah, it's a good point.
No, I think that's a good... Yeah.
I'd also add that if you look at the record they've got recently, City, they've done pretty well. They haven't lost for a while, but they've had a really nice run of fixtures, right?
But they've done well.
And yeah, they have. Yeah. But then this was obviously a real test. This was probably the first game for a wee while that was a proper test. And I think the other games in that run you could argue were a slight test, were probably Brighton away, and they drew. Brighton at home, they drew. And then obviously the Manchester derby, which was, taking your dog to be put down. It was just appalling. I mean, there are people out there listening and think to themselves thinking they'd rather take their dog to be put down than watch that again.
Yeah.
And they come up against Villa.
I'm disappointed you've mentioned it, actually.
and my take a couple of weeks ago on our YouTube channel was that it probably comes, at the time I was thinking it probably comes down to not so much a straight shootout between Aston Villa and Manchester City for this kind of Champions League position, but this game was going to be a big part of it, and I thought Villa would prevail, and they still might. There's a lot of games left, so Man City were able to stand up to what Villa gave them in terms of an examination last night, which in itself is interesting because my take on City has been once they get a stern examination and you judge them on the standards you're used to judging them on, so Arsenal away, Liverpool at home got beaten fairly handily. The Real Madrid test, they got beaten. Like that's where they are. Yet against Villa, who have been good, who have gone deep in the Champions League, who are a really well drilled, tactically astute unit with players off the bench that can affect things, they actually stood up to it.
But not trusting this season's City is almost built into the way you absorb it now. Because my first feeling at the end, as well as that is an incredibly damaging goal to Aston Villa, it wasn't what did City do right, it's what did Villa do wrong. Actually, that was the way I looked at it. And actually, if they'd have closed this out as a draw, which I think, despite the fact they're behind them, I think would have been a pretty acceptable result for Aston Villa in the context of everything. I think you would have looked at it as so much of what Aston Villa have done under Unai Emery is not really Unai Emery-ish. It's far more attacking and expressive than a lot of his teams have been. But I would have got to the end of this, it had been a 1-1 draw, and said, yeah, City have been old school Emery there. Because I think the way that City deserved to win the game, they had a lot of the game, but they didn't have as many clear chances as they should have had for how much they dominated the second half in particular. I would have never have said Villa were comfortable, but they definitely had it under control for most of that second half, I think.
I agree, and I think what would be a real inflection point for me was that 20 seconds in, Rashford hits the post. Great play. They hit them really hard, really early, which is a sensible thing to do against City, who don't really know what they're all about at the moment. And it comes off the inside of the post, goes straight back into Ortega's arms. And you're like, that could have been a moment. Because if you concede really early, your assignment totally changes. And like I say, with Villa, they're perfectly set up, particularly with the players that can come off the bench, to really affect things. The players that Villa brought off the bench last night, by the way, John McGinn, Ollie Watkins, Marco Asensio and Daniel Malin.
Not too shabby.
All really good players that can affect the game. So I thought it was a stern examination of City and they came through it. And I think they deserve a huge amount of credit for that because, they've been amazing. They've then gone to a position where they found it really tough and everyone's piled on them, including me, and I totally understand that because that's how it goes. And then when they come out of the back end of a really really tough result at a crucial part of the season in which it really solidifies their Champions League aim. They deserve credit for it. I thought they were good.
Yeah, they've definitely improved as the season's gone on in this period. The pressure is off them. I mean, there's not been any title talk for goodness knows how long because it's never been there. But I've been critical of Man City this season, as I'm sure a lot of us have. But last night I was impressed, especially in that second half, the way that they kept pressing Villa, and just kept Villa in their own half, and you. By the law of averages, you probably will get some kind of reward. To bring on Doku as well is again a handy player to have on the bench. I mean, what a beautiful assist it was. I understand for Villa, you're thinking, how on earth did that get through everybody?
He's just been consistently good, even though they've had this tough. Even when they had that really tough period, the really bad period, he still looked good.
Yeah, exactly.
And I sometimes think with City, just to build on what you're saying there, they've gone through a period where they've been asked a lot of questions and not had the answers because they've been so used to being the ones asking all the questions all the time.
Yes.
And that was really apparent when they went through that insane run from the end of October for a while, where it's just they couldn't. It was almost like they were personally affronted that teams were kind of asking questions of them. Yeah. And I saw it in the flesh at Arsenal. They come up against a good team who really believed they could do something. And if you think about Arsenal, getting past Real Madrid, that belief they had that belief against City as well, and it was like you could see Guardiola on the touchline, like looking around a bit like confused.
That's it.
What do I do here?
Yeah, they arrive at that point where they're 2-0 up in Paris, but not for a minute do you think they're going to win the game.
No.
Which is totally bizarre.
That fragility, you could argue, has perhaps gone. Them being the best footballing side in the land is not there. Will they get that back next season? Well, we'll talk about that next season. But in the here and now, they've steadied themselves and are trying to establish themselves, if you like, as being the third best team in the league by finishing third. You again, that fragility that they had where you think, we'll just push them here and they're crumbling, right, and you sniff blood and you're away. I think that part of them seems to have been eradicated, or it's largely been eradicated. They've kind of turned that around, whether getting players back from injury or kind of settling into the new normal of them not dominating and not being the team that they were with some ageing stars and so on and so forth. And so with that, what's happened is, right, okay, we've now accepted where we are, we've got some players back, etc., etc. Now what are we doing? Right, let's qualify for the Champions League here. Let's do that. It happened to Klopp's Liverpool when they just about nipped in there, and it's kind of it's reassessing where they are, because if
do you reckon Edison's thinking, I'm going to score a vital goal at some point in this run? He definitely is, by the way. He definitely is thinking
well,
that.
he doesn't look like he's going to need to, sadly, Andy. But who knows? There's still games to play. But Man City now, when Nottingham Forest drew Man City in the FA Cup a number of weeks ago, they might have thought, okay, all right, well, we can, they're beatable, which they are still. But now, a few weeks on from that, they look less beatable than what they were.
Yeah,
because I thought Villa were going to really give them problems.
I think the interesting thing is the way this Villa game panned out, particularly in the second half. It's actually the perfect warm-up for Manchester City ahead of playing Nottingham Forest. Because I was at Spurs on Monday night to see Forest. And again, fast start, and then just like got in a low block and said, okay, right, we challenge you to knock us down.
And Spurs were like, we're Spurs.
And that's But that's kind of what City had to do within the second half. And what you were talking about, them getting over the psychological difficulties, City, of where they were. I think they dealt with that really well last night because, as I said, they really dominated the second half, but without creating a string of chances.
I mean, they're missing a striker, obviously.
Yeah, that is true, but they've still got Marmoush, and if you look at Emi Martinez, touches the ball loads. But how many of those are blinding saves? Not really that many. And it's called on City to have a moment, you were talking about it with Doku, of extraordinary quality to actually open the game up. There's no other way that they're breaking through because Villa defend very, very well. And I think City do well to dominate and not lose heart. Because normally, if you're City, in any normal situation, you just like have a little puff at the door and it falls in.
Exactly.
Whereas they're banging on the door quite hard and it's not moving. No one's answering. So for them to be able to carry on and be persistent and not think, we're only getting a draw out of this. I think it's a massive step for them.
It's a huge win. I mean, Villa, it looked to me that their game plan was similar to what they did against Newcastle. They knew that they were going to be pressed. And so Martinez and co were just go over it, and it worked superbly against Newcastle. You have to say.
And Newcastle completely ran out of steam as well.
Yeah, they did. They did.
And Newcastle's season has been punctuated by that type of performance because, weirdly enough, they also got completely dominated against City when they lost 4-0 against them as well.
But also the 4-1 against Bournemouth, but that was different kind of things. But it feels like Newcastle go on these amazing runs and then boom, they
massive peaks and massive troughs. We've said it before this season. I think the difference between Newcastle's best and Newcastle's worst is like significant.
It's a bit like the weather in the English summertime when you have like a week of like really hot weather and you go, here we go. And then you kind of go, oh yeah, we need to pay for this, don't we?
Yeah.
And then a couple of days of like serious downpours.
And then the worst bit about the English summertime weather is when you get through a really hot, humid period in London, and then it gets to September and you think, okay, it's going to start to be nice and autumnal now. And you get brutalised by about 4 days of a really inexplicable 30-degree temperature from nowhere in September that you're just not mentally prepared for.
Different point to what I was making.
It was, but I was building on it.
Okay. So how are you going to weave that into the Newcastle United narrative?
Well, no, I'm going to build it into the Man City narrative by saying you think Man City are done, you think the summer's over. But they come back and they beat Forest in the FA Cup semi-final. I do want to make a point about this FA Cup semi-final because what you guys were saying there about what City are capable of, and almost like this muscle memory of it's still there in flickers, it comes back and they're still able to do stuff. Like it makes me feel. Last night made me feel like they'll probably get past Forest now because a Wembley semi-final in the FA Cup for them is basically a home game. It's like home for them. They're so used to it. Whereas Forest will expend so much energy. Oh fucking hell, we've got an amazing opportunity here. I can just see City cruising past them now.
Yeah, well, let's hope that that it's more of a game than what we think because I don't think it will be. But it could well be Villa and Man City in the final again. Who knows? But Villa themselves, they're still very much in the mix. I know Emery was kind of gutted after it, but he said, we're proud of what we're doing. Crazy that they're in 7th and yet just 2 points off those Champions League places. I think for Villa, it would be, again, you could choose your words carefully. If they win the FA Cup and qualify for the Europa League, it's a successful season because you've won that FA Cup. Okay, so let me be clear. However, because of what happened in their journey in the Champions League, they're desperate to get back in it.
Especially with 5 teams qualifying.
Yeah.
I think it would feel like a massive letdown if they didn't make it.
Because they'll feel that they're better than Forest and Newcastle. Yeah, they will feel
totally. And it's unfair to judge them on that, especially when they've got used to dealing with the extra demands this season. But I think it's quite interesting. Before, the stat that we were all talking about is the fact that they habitually don't win after Champions League games. And now we're looking at only Southampton have conceded more 90-plus goals.
Is that right?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Than Villa. So I think that was the 8th goal that Villa have conceded in 90th minute or later.
Right.
And for someone like Emery, who his starting point is keeping it tight. Of course, he has very different players, and he's leaned into that, and we can see that by the football that Villa have played, and particularly the business that have done in January. But that will be something to look at if they don't make that top 5, and especially with Newcastle being quite inconsistent, especially with Chelsea being where they are in 2025. It'll be an enormous disappointment to them if they don't make the top 5. But
they are battle hardened, they are really well coached, and they haven't really got I think they've got one tricky game between now and the end of the season, which is Bournemouth away, which is that tricky? Bournemouth are basically a mid-table team now. Everything other than that's pretty straightforward for them if they apply themselves and get it done. They don't run out of steam. It's basically still in their own hands because they've got a squad.
They've got a squad where they should be able to not run out of steam, as you say.
You'd think as well, though, with Marcus Rashford. I mean, clearly they want to keep him. If they don't qualify for Champions League, I mean, what Emery says. There are suggestions that Rashford is holding out for a really big move. Say, like PSG and Barcelona have been named.
All he needs is someone who's going to pay him anywhere near what he's getting paid at the moment.
What is it, 350 grand a week at Man United?
It's unreal.
Yeah.
And sack a few more canteen staff.
Because I think Villa are paying something like 270 grand of it or something. And I was like, oh yeah, that's not his full wage.
And also with Villa, where they are a team. You look at the amount of their turnover they spend on wages. Then you look at the players they went out and got in January. It looks beautiful. I really enjoy watching them play.
Yeah.
But they need to think very hard if they're going to sign Marcus Rashford on a permanent, because that is. And how do you sell that to the rest of the dressing room as well? Even if say he out of the goodness of his heart said, yeah, all right, I'll just accept 270 next season. It's a massive gamble. I think there are a lot of conversations to be had before we get to the point where he's a permanent Aston Villa.
Yeah, whereas football players normally in a dressing room, they're all completely unionised. They're the same, very socialist. There's no example of that.
Ethan Ampadu and the bonuses at Leeds.
We'll come on to that, won't we?
We will.
Yeah.
Why does money always get in the way of a good time? Hey,
I wish it would here.
Yeah, we are desperate for that. We want to do the Saudi Pro League Football Ramble. They will not have us because of Pete's drinking habits.
Look, think about it this way. We've been having a good time for 18 years. Now let's let the money get in the way.
Yeah, exactly. Come and see where we live.
Let's at least try it.
You wouldn't believe. Yeah, nice penalty though from Rashford. Have you know? I think he's doing the old Ivan Toney these days.
Yeah.
Just
I told you
before.
I told you before. There's two ways of doing a penalty now, and one way is to kind of choose your spot, do your process. To Harry Kane, and it's the same every time.
Even Kane's changed.
But I mean, in terms of I'm not saying he puts the penalty in the same place every time. I'm saying his process is the same generally. Yeah. I know he started to adjust into the more second one, which I'm about to say, which is the one that Rashford does, where you look for the goalkeeper to move his weight.
Yes, indeed. And it didn't work for Eberechi Eze though the other night.
Well, Eze's one is basically don't ever fall in.
Yeah, but you know what though? Nick Pope did really well for that because he
which is also amazing given that he died this week.
Indeed. Long live the Pope. He actually shifted one way, which is why Eze thought, there you go. And old tricky Nicky Pope was like, oh, sucked you in there, didn't I?
I will take a seat. Thank you.
Yes, exactly, yeah. Staying very briefly with Manchester City, did you see Kevin De Bruyne revealed last week that he was a bit surprised when Man City didn't offer him a new contract?
He's been Thomas Mullered.
Yeah. But De Bruyne says a lot of stuff. He's very outspoken.
Yeah, but you could still be surprised and bug out. I was a bit surprised, but I thought, I
suppose.
The thing is, because of the couple of games he's had recently, you will have people out there saying, they shouldn't have let him go. And, you talked about that a couple of weeks ago, didn't you, on the mailbag, about maybe he'd stayed a season too long. Look, he's had a couple of great games. We know he's one of the best players ever to have played in the Premier League. None of that goes against your argument.
No, I agree.
It doesn't.
And it's also, the point is, as you guys have both already said, and I'll just reiterate, of course someone like Kevin De Bruyne, at the age of 33, soon to be 34, with the injury record he's had, of course, with someone of his ability and experience, he's still able to do things here and there and show flickers. It's never going to leave him, really, a lot of that stuff.
But why bother?
But that's but he's fucking fed up of it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
No, it's just that you can't.
I've proved my point.
Yeah, you can't be relied upon either because of his body breaking down or because he's not able to maintain the level. I think sometimes with this kind of conversation. A lot of people just completely misunderstand the intensity and the level you need to be at to contribute at a club of that level consistently.
Even for 40 games a season.
He's done 16 Premier League starts this season. I think he's had 16 Premier League starts this season. So, I mean, he's roughly half the games. I know he's come on off the bench here and there. Of course, he's going to be capable of doing stuff here and there. No one's saying that. No one's saying instantly he's now a shit player and he shouldn't be in the Premier League anymore. We're just saying, it's clear to everyone to see that he's not at that level of intensity anymore.
Keith Richards can still bang out a few power chords.
He's got someone backstage doing it.
Do you think?
Maybe. I've seen the Stones live and I think he's getting a lot of help.
Do you reckon?
Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah. So have you seen that?
There's no football equivalent to that, is there?
Is that why that time like he smashed Stage Invader with his guitar? Like the music kept going.
Probably.
Ooh,
I don't want to cast aspersions over a legend.
Theory.
But for example, if you notice, and then you guys have noticed this, but if you ever see Metallica playing live, for example, they don't do their pedals anymore. So their pedals are done by someone else. So they stomp around the stage with wireless amps and stuff and play. So when they flick from playing some rhythm bits to a solo and the guitar sound changes, there's someone doing that for them.
Okay. Yeah, but that's all right.
Yeah, I'm not criticising it. I love Metallica.
But who is this supposed? They should come out at the end and get the bow.
Yeah.
You know?
Do you not remember there was a big uproar about it a few years ago when I think U2, I think it was, headline Glastonbury. Remember, did they headline Glastonbury?
Sounds about right.
And people were talking about how the Edge wasn't doing his own pedals and someone else was doing it. And it became a big thing. But it's like, well, he wants to go around and see different parts of the stage and perform.
It's his weekend as well.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe.
Where's he going? He's off to the new whatever stage tent or whatever.
Maybe De Bruyne could just get someone else to do the tracking back.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
I'll do the free kicks still. Yep. I'll do them.
That's it.
No problem. I'll have the pops from distance.
If I want to wander out to the healing field, I will.
Yeah, but you can't do it. And that was when the Edge went off to get his face painted in the secret garden. That was a mistake.
De Bruyne is saying
during the solo.
There's 15 minutes left. The sun's coming up in a minute. I'm off to find a pinger.
Or do a pinger, as we've seen him do many times.
Exactly.
Of course. I did quite like that Bernardo Silva's reportedly told that he will not be offered a new deal. He wants to return to Portugal. Finally, they're giving him what he wanted. After every scene, again, the Danny Glover of the Premier League. It's just like, let me go.
Danny Glover in the Premier League. I love that.
They're saying to him, look what happened to Gundogan.
Yeah.
He went away and he came back again.
Exactly.
Better the devil you know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You go when you're ready, not because you feel like you have to go.
You might think you like Louisa in accounts.
Yeah.
But stay married to me.
Exactly.
Because I'm more reliable.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I may make you take the bins out, but I promise you, in Portugal, they fart in bed as well.
Coming up after this, Jamie Vardy isn't having a party. We're going on tour, everybody. The Football Ramble time tunnel is coming to a city near you. Glasgow, Newcastle, Birmingham, Manchester and London between the 9th of May and the 17th of May. Click on the link that's just appeared in the top right-hand corner of this video and get your tickets. Don't delay. Get one today.
Now to McCrory. Cross into the box. Headed clear. Mengi. Tanner shoots. Oh, it's an equaliser. Equaliser there from Tanner.
Oh, welcome back to the Football Ramble, everybody. James Shea, Luton Town commentator there, getting rather annoyed.
Commentator and third choice goalkeeper.
Yeah, well, I should say.
You know, he's played in every one of the 4 divisions.
That's incredible.
Yeah, I've got a complicated opinion of James Shea because I like that clip, but he came off the bench at Fratton Park at the start of the season when Kaminsky was sent off, and Pompey had an extra man for something like 60 minutes, and he kept Pompey out for the whole game and they drew 0-0.
That's his job.
Yeah, it is his job, but it's annoying is what I'm saying.
Well, commentary clearly shouldn't be his job.
I'd like to see him do more commentary.
We were reacting there to Bristol City's equaliser against Luton, although Luton did go on to win the game 3-1.
Oh, the championship this season down the bottom as well. It's been incredible.
It has been incredible.
Unreal.
And I'm saying that now because Pompey are out of it.
Yeah, you're lower mid-table. You don't have nothing to do with that.
The thing is, this is how crazy it's been. I've been in genuine fear of relegation for a good while now, and actually, there's a chance that Pompey will basically finish. They could finish like 12th.
Yeah.
Has the Ramble officially celebrated next season's return of the South Coast Derby?
I think we're going to do it now, Andy.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'll tell you whether I'm going to decide to celebrate it or not when it happens. But I'm pleased that Portsmouth are playing them. I'm pleased that.
Get them earlier in the season when they're still shit?
I don't get them any time, mate. No problem.
Easy,
fighting talk. I love it.
Easy peasy. Let's stay in the Championship because Leeds United and Burnley were, of course, promoted this week on Easter Monday after Burnley's 2-1 victory.
They've risen.
United.
They've risen.
They've done it. They have done it. And it's not finished. It's just starting for them because they will be Premier League next year, or next season, should I say, because it'll be this calendar year, Andy.
Yes. I did particularly enjoy in the crowd at Turf Moor, quite a few people had those little flags saying we are Premier League, which were presumably handed out free last time they got promoted.
Oh.
Keep it.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great faith. Showing the faith. That is.
Great recycling is what it is.
It is. It's very sustainable.
Yes,
we
exactly.
like that.
Musketeer would be all over that.
You would. It's like a reusable rocket.
Yeah, he's all about the environment. His environment.
Yeah.
So Burnley, as we know, they've been fantastic defensively this season. They've kept 29 clean sheets, conceding just 15 goals so far. It's phenomenal stuff from Parker.
And yet.
How are they
going to do it next season?
Well, if they
but come on, let's not even get to that point.
No, let's fucking get stuck into them. Let's get stuck into.
Why do you think they got John Joe Shelby in? It wasn't for this year. It wasn't for this season, was it? It's for next season. Can they keep him, Andy?
It certainly wasn't for this season. I mean, he's played 11 minutes, so it certainly wasn't for this season.
Yeah, well, there you go. Keep him dry. Keep him ready. And then
do you think he's thinking that? Do you think he's like walking onto the training pitch, smug look on his face?
Been bubble wrapped for the Premier League,
lads.
Yeah. Hurry up, get this out of the way. Do my doggies for me.
Yeah.
And then when the Prem turns up, I'll be there.
But it is. Look, we should celebrate what they've done. We should also celebrate what Leeds have done because they had, obviously relegated. Huge disappointment for them last season.
Last season was a sickener for them.
And to recover from that,
and they've bounced back and done really well. Look, there's the other side to it, which is they're an absolutely huge club, and all things being equal, they'd be in the Premier League as a stalwart team anyway. But we understand that's not how things work. I do think, though, beyond the general congratulations of them being promoted, it is really tricky to see how they approach it next season. They're going to have to start thinking about that almost straight away, unfortunately. I know there's a couple of games left in the Championship, but that's done now for them. And they are going to have to work out what they're going to do, because, you don't need to look far around the country for different clubs who have done brilliantly, say, defensively in the Championship and then gone up and found it tough. And you don't even need to look outside of Burnley for that.
But do we not think that's a slightly different thing with Burnley? Because Burnley came up under Company playing really pretty football, continued to try and play that pretty football in the Premier League, and it totally bit them in the arse. Are they not maybe a little bit better prepared now? I mean, I think the biggest problem for them, because their defence has obviously been impeccable this season, a huge part of that has been James Trafford, who they are clearly going to struggle to keep next season. Wouldn't be surprising if he ended up replacing Nick Pope at Newcastle, for example, on his route to his eventual route to the England team.
No one has done, as far as I can remember, and people can jump in and email or whatever and say if I'm wrong here, I can't remember anyone doing what Burnley have done defensively this season, how good they've been, how airtight they've been, and I think that's fair enough. But you also have to remember, in the season that Burnley were promoted under Company, they did play really great football and they were brilliant, but they were also the best defensive team in the Championship.
Yes, so just as
they weren't.
Bayern have defended very well, actually, for the
that was going to be
half, 2/3 of this season.
I know we're glancing into next season. I'm glancing 2 seasons' time. How do you think Scott Parker will set up at Bayern?
Sean Dyche is still fuming about all this.
Well,
with that same jacket, I think is the answer.
Yeah, that'll look great.
Did you notice when he was going up into the box and cuddling his family, his son had the same jacket?
That's nice.
That's lovely.
That is lovely. Look, with Burnley under Parker, it's a different approach than what Company took. But Parker now has, presumably he's going to be there next season. I don't think they'll get rid of him. It's a chance for him now to have another crack at the Premier League. And he's been promoted. What is it? His 3rd promotion, or he knows how to get out the Championship.
Yeah.
He hasn't shown that he knows how to stay in the Premier League. Really,
no. The stakes are really high for Parker, because even if you look at what happened at Bournemouth, they come up.
Yeah.
They win the first game of the season against Aston Villa. They get pumped in the next 3 games, and he loses his job because he comes out and says that his team are quote unquote unequipped for the Premier League and the transfer policy isn't good enough. So the ownership at Burnley not only know that this guy knows how to get teams out the Championship and get into the Premier League, they know that he's not going to stay quiet if he's not backed, and they've got a massive challenge on their hands to not only back him but get it right in terms of the recruitment to give them a chance. Because I think that obviously Burnley have been absolutely outstanding this season, but you have to look at whether you think that back 5 that they and the 2 players in front of the back 5 who kind of do a lot of shielding, a lot of protection, that even someone like Josh Brownhill, who's done brilliantly and it was absolutely outstanding at Sheffield United in the game they actually get promoted in. Is he someone who's going to be able to keep up with the pace in the midfield of the Premier League? We don't know.
I mean, Brownhill is almost Parker in player form, isn't he? Sort of promotion specialist who now needs to prove that he's someone who can do it week in, week out in the Premier League.
Yeah, and it's not that dissimilar a job in sort of feeling that Farke has at Leeds United. Because again, Farke's had his struggles in the Premier League, a little bit more experience than
that's true.
Scott Parker. But Leeds expect. They're a huge club, as we know. They feel like they should be in the Premier League, and I think a lot of the country would probably agree with that in terms of the size of the club and history and all the rest, fan base and blah, blah, blah. So the pressure will come thick and fast, but where Farke has really impressed, according to a lot of Leeds fans and a lot of reports and articles and so on and so forth, is his temperament, his man management, and all that
topics.
Kind of stuff. Well, he's got all the topics right.
Are we going to bring it back next season?
Have we got to bring the topics back?
Well, it's up to him, Andy.
He's got to bring the topics back.
Yeah, exactly.
But I totally agree, and the guys, the people should get their flowers for that. It's easy for us to sit here and say, well, Leeds should be in the Premier League anyway, right? But
Villa felt the same. Forest felt the same.
But by acknowledging that about Leeds, of course, that brings its own pressure because everyone's expecting it, right?
Totally. But they will look at, when Villa went up after a little bit of time, and a different thing, but they'll look at Villa and they're scrambling, and suddenly they kick on. And Forest as well being, a sensational season they're having and have had. They're thinking, right, how do we become like that? Not this kind of, we're sort of making up the numbers and next season is all about staying in the league. How then can you think right?
And the question off the back of that, Marcus, is what we talked about before in a mailbag show a few months ago, is that we are seeing some early evidence now that if you are a Forest or you are a Brentford or a Brighton or even a Fulham or a Bournemouth, the trapdoor might now have been, or the kind of drawbridge might now have been pulled up behind you. It might now be no longer enough to be a Leeds or a big club like a Leeds and come up, because we don't know how any team is going to bridge that gap. Because as we sit here now, I think that plenty of fans out there listening to this show will say, well, Ipswich are a big club. They finished in the upper echelons of the Premier League before. Leicester City have won it. Yeah. Southampton have been ever present in the Premier League for a long time.
I think these are very different.
Well, currently, the best of those three is 15 points from safety with 5 games left.
But I think that's a very different situation. I mean, you're talking in Ipswich, who have clearly done the best out of those promoted teams. They're on a hiding to nothing because they've been promoted League One, Championship, Premier League, and the gap that you've got to bridge there is just unbelievable, even if they had been pushing to come up out of League One for a while. Leicester, they've got financial challenges that have hampered them for a very long time, so I think they're an isolated case. And Southampton, well, just clearly weren't ready for it in any way, shape or form. But I do agree, obviously Leeds, Burnley +1. Leeds are the one who look as if they're most equipped to be able to possibly make go of it. I'm not saying they're definitely going to stay up or anything like that. But, I know, Marcus, you were going to talk about the way that Farke sort of managed the disappointment of how they didn't come up through the playoffs last season. He clearly got people on board to such an extent. You think of, say, Brendan Aronson, who was, is a good player, who was playing top division football in Germany and playing Champions League football in Germany last season on loan for Union Berlin. He said, I'm coming back to Leeds to get promoted and establish ourselves in the Premier League. So it's not like they're like, we've got promoted. Now we need to think about establishing ourselves in the Premier League. They have been thinking about establishing themselves in the Premier League before the start of this season.
Oh, absolutely.
So I think if you look at the squad Leeds have got, clearly there'll need to be a bit of strengthening, but their ambition is such and their focus is such. Like, Farke knows that all that pressure is on him, and he's known the whole time. But I think him and a lot of those players who, you look at Manos Solomon, for example, who's been bought into, and I think he'll probably stay at Leeds next season, who've been bought into establishing them as a Premier League club way before the point that they've got promoted. I think they're going to be better prepared than any promoted side has been for a while. Of course, we won't know until they get there, but that's the feeling that I have.
Just quickly, fair enough. I'm not criticising them for any particular reason, but Brendan Aronson and Manos Solomon are not going to keep Leeds in the Premier League.
On their own, no.
Well, no, you can't play 2 players, but
they could.
Not a single other Premier League team is shitting themselves thinking, "Oh my God, they've got Aronson and Solomon."
No, I don't think that's what it's about, really. I think to be able to get players of that sort of quality to want to play for you in the Championship is already a massive step, and I think it suggests that other players of Premier League quality will want to come and play for them and make them a team that are at least competitive enough to try and stay up.
That could be the case.
We have a voice note from Marie, who is the what do we call her? How do I say it? I was going to say the grandmother of the Discord, but that makes it sound really old. She's a godmother.
The Queen of the Discord.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, big Leeds fan, of course.
Yeah,
she's American. She lives over there, but she loves her Leeds United.
Leeds are in the Premier League again. Going up. Leeds are going up.
But you think they're going straight back down, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. I'll just say enjoy it while you can.
That's the first time that I've seen you go red on the face of the broadcast. You wish you'd have listened to that and then done your take, didn't you?
No, I think that, given anyone who spends any time on the Discord, which people listen to should, because it's a great place to discuss football, will know that Marie spends most of her time abusing me via voice notes on the Discord anyway. So I'm just pleased to hear one that's not personally slagging me off.
But that's something we can all get behind. Yeah. So Leeds are going up. Leicester City, we know, are going down. And earlier this week, Jamie Vardy took to social media to vent his frustrations after their relegation was confirmed on Sunday. And I'm sure a lot of you have seen this. He said on his socials, "At this point, I don't even know what to say. No words I have can express my feelings of anger and sadness with the way the season has gone. There are no excuses. Collectively, as players and as a club, we failed. There is simply no hiding, and I refuse to entertain any suggestion of doing so."
Not really the worst thing a member of the Vardy family is on social media, though.
Yeah.
He's not chucking his phone in the North Sea yet.
Well, I was about to say, he would have said this on, but it fell. Having been at this club for so long, we've experienced so many highs and successes, and this season has been nothing but miserable, and for me personally, a total embarrassment. It hurts, and I know you're feeling it too. To the fans, I'm sorry. Sorry we haven't performed, and sorry we end the 2025 season with such a shit show.
No, it's funny.
Surely there was a chance for Wayne Rooney to have a little comment there.
We're ending the season with an absolute shit show at the Shepherd's Bush Empire on May the 18th, 17th.
Hopefully it won't be a literal shit show, but we don't know what Pete's got in store for us.
But I think that if you look at look, I understand why Vardy's done that. He's a legend at Leicester. He's an all-time legend, and rightly so, and no one should ever take away from the contribution he's made for that club.
Premier League and FA Cup winner.
Yeah, I sometimes think that with all the personality behind him and all the takes that we have about him, which I think is fair enough, you have to be careful not to lose sight of the fact of how important he's been for them.
And he's a footballer.
He's top scorer for them this season. And it's only 7 goals, but he is. He's 38.
Yeah, I know.
Do you know what I mean?
I think he's chipped in a bit, certainly at the start of the season, yeah. It has been a shit show. Ruud van Nistelrooy has claimed just 8 points from 20 Premier League matches he presided over. I know I'm not going to defend Van Nistelrooy, but I'm not going to stick the boot in massively.
No, I think, Marcus, I think you should. Look, there's 2 points.
Well,
here.
I should or shouldn't.
I think you should stick the boot on him.
Okay.
I'll just say the Vardy thing. I think I don't want to speak on behalf of Leicester City fans. They've had a fucking shocker this season. It's been pretty brutal for them, and I imagine there's not been much to enjoy. But I like to think Leicester City fans will be seeing that from Vardy and going, thanks for saying that. It's fair enough to be honest.
Yeah.
Your contribution you've made is amazing over the years. Like you say, Marcus, Premier League, FA Cup winner, just a legend there.
And very nice to know that a footballer is doing his own social media rather than paying someone to do it for him.
And he's fronting up. He's not accidentally posting a picture of a sports car on his socials, is he? He's fronting up. No. On the Van Nistelrooy thing, I'm surprised to say for you to say you're not going to stick the boot in.
Well, no,
let me tell you why.
Well, I'm going to defend him. I just think that there's such problems at that club.
Yeah, there are. But
just to put it on him.
Yeah. Well, okay.
I stick the boot in not too much.
Both these things can be true.
Give him a little toe in.
Both these things can be true, right? You say you don't want to stick it all on one guy. I understand that they've had financial challenges, and I understand that they kind of feel like they might be, fucked one way or fucked all the other. If they stayed in the Premier League, they might have found it difficult for different disciplinary reasons. If they get relegated, they might find the same. I get all that. But ultimately, the reason I have no sympathy for Van Nistelrooy is because in public life, which is or in a massive high-profile job, you are not sitting there when you go for the job thinking, I'm not sure if I want to take responsibility ultimately if it goes wrong. You're saying, I can do this job and I want to do it. When you've been this bad... And it's been bad in terms of the eye test, not just the points they've got, which has been risible, but it's been bad. It's been historically bad.
16 of those 20 Premier League matches ended in defeat, and Leicester failing to score in all but 2 of them.
Call me old-fashioned all you like. As far as I'm concerned, what Ruud van Nistelrooy should have done already by now, in my view, is he should have bowed out gracefully and said,
I think that's fair.
We've been relegated. It's not a massive surprise we've been relegated. However, the manner in which we've been relegated has been nowhere near good enough. I bear ultimate responsibility for that because that's my job as the manager of this football team. So I'm off. Thanks very much. Sorry it wasn't better. I apologise for not doing better, but I did my best. I hope you won't hold it against me, blah, blah, blah. See you later. Why on earth is he hanging around like a bad smell when he has been not just bad, but historically bad under admittedly quite difficult circumstances?
Yeah, answer that, Andy. Why?
I would agree with that. I think
you agree with that as well, do you, Andy? Make your mind up.
I think
I'm furious over here.
All right, Andy, we've heard the attack on Van Nistelrooy. Now you've got to defend him.
You're going for a cuppa, are you? We can go back and forth on this for ages.
I feel like the kid at school who you've given someone a shoe in and I've just come in at the end and gone,
Stuck a toe in, not a boot in.
That's toe. I don't want to hurt myself.
It's fair to say he's part of the problem, even if he isn't the entire problem. I mean, the optics of it are terrible because if at this point you don't quit, the only possible conclusion to draw is you don't think you're good enough to get another job, basically.
Well, or you're hanging around for your money, or you maybe think, do I fancy taking them in the Championship? I mean,
of course he doesn't fancy taking them in the Championship. I think you look at this, how on earth are they going to get promoted next season?
Yeah, and I also think on the back...
honestly,
the mood is so low. I mean, Van Nistelrooy can't be there.
Let me bring a bit of balance into my own kind of aggressive take. Look, I do think if they had fought really hard, and they go into the final game of the season and they just get relegated, and he's walking around the pitch clapping, saying that we did our best, we came really close, it was tough, here's why it was tough.
That's different.
I think I'd be like, fair enough. You know what? You could possibly do a Daniel Farke, right? You could go, can we pick him back up again? Can we go again? Do the players believe in it? We've fought so hard, we've just come up short, there's no shame in that. This has been astonishingly poor, and I would say the only reason it's not been more talked about is because of how bad Southampton have been.
Okay, so I agree with that one. And
true.
so at the start, I suppose I worded it wrongly. I'm thinking that this is not just because of Van Nistelrooy, but you are spot on to say he's been piss poor, and actually to not galvanise them in any kind of way. And
It can't have seemed to affect a game.
but the record speaks for itself about how piss poor it's been. I mean, Ruud van Pistelrooy more like, Andy? But the club, I just didn't want the hierarchy and what's going on at the club to not be mentioned.
No, I totally agree with that. Look, I think it's hard to imagine what sort of coach or what coach would keep them up. I just don't think it was particularly doable.
But the manner of it, I think.
Yeah, they're so far from good enough. But yeah, the manner of it is important. This isn't Marco Silva just failing to keep Hull up. This is something totally different. And when you look at some of the candidates that have been put out there for the job, Cesc Fabregas, how is Cesc Fabregas going to take this job? Like, seriously,
He'll take something big to prize him away from Lake Como, presumably.
He's at an incredibly well-funded team, club that are halfway up Serie A, that have got massive ambitions
And have lovely surroundings, Andy.
Would you like to come to Leicester to like make some token attempt at bringing us back up with like next to no resources?
Can I
think we know what the answer to that is.
Allow me to put it in perspective, right? In 2009-10, Portsmouth got to the FA Cup final under Avram Grant and were relegated, I think 3 or 4 months after going into administration, and were about to go out of business, were deducted 9 points, and they've still got more points than Leicester.
God,
Put it in perspective.
Wait. They were great times, weren't they? They were great times.
I'm sorry, I was getting all misty-eyed then.
I understand it was all a bit of a shit show, but my goodness, it was a show of sorts.
We had Uncle Avi.
There you go. Oh, dear, where is he? Don't ask.
What time is it? It's 10:30.
Yeah, he'll probably be there. Yeah. He'll be finishing up, pun intended, in a minute. So Cesc Fabregas has been linked to the job. I'm sure he hasn't linked himself there. Lee Carsley, another one. Lee, stay with the England under-21s. You've got a lovely job there.
I don't know. I can kind of see why someone who is desperate for a job would want it.
Yeah, the only thing would be if the board said, look, you'll have money to spend.
But it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, well, indeed.
This is the problem. The current football, we haven't got time for this now. I know we've got to go to a break, but the current footballing model, when unfettered in this way, leaves clubs like that in this kind of situation. And you'd have to have rocks in your head to go anywhere near it as a manager. You would.
Absolutely.
Vardy, player manager. I know that sounds mad, but he's already there at least. He wants to do his penance for having a terrible season this season, although he's not been that bad. If he loves the club like he does, stay there.
Could you have?
It'd be amazing, wouldn't it?
For
Vardy, player manager.
For us.
Can you imagine if he was the manager, the amount of empty Red Bull cans you'd have by the bench? It'd be like in Train Spotting, where Begbie's chucking the cans out the bedroom.
Andy would be the epitome of what's good for the Ramble, isn't it?
It's not the only way that Vardy's like Begbie, by the way.
Right, coming up after this, the Premier League title could be decided tonight. Arsenal versus Crystal Palace at 8 p.m. Arsenal do the right thing, win tonight, so Liverpool have to get a result against Spurs. But no doubt through North London solidarity, Spurs will do their damnedest to try and prolong that title race for another week.
I think Spurs are beyond that. I think even if Spurs wanted to delay it, they wouldn't be able to anyway. Even if it was the other way round, they wouldn't be able to.
It's a fair point of view.
Yeah. So a defeat for Arsenal against Palace at the Emirates would hand Liverpool the title. A draw would leave Mikel Arteta's side 12 points behind, with only 12 points left to play for. So I think we can say that the title race is over. Arsenal, though, they have won their last 5 Premier League games against Crystal Palace, so it would be unlikely if we see a Palace victory this evening. I mean, all joking aside with Arsenal, obviously their priority is the Champions League now, but they've got to make sure, which we're all fairly confident they will do. Well, very confident they will do. But just glancing over their shoulder, I suppose. Make sure you finish second.
Yeah, I think you need just a couple of wins to make sure there's no late season drama.
Again, they're looking good for it, but you don't want to completely switch off from the Premier League.
No, what you don't need is a situation where you're limbering up for very important Champions League matches and possibly a final. And you're like, oh shit, we've got to win a couple to make sure we're actually in it next season.
Exactly, yeah. So tonight again, it's one of those games where you think, right, well, get it done efficiently early, and no injuries, lads.
They're in a bit of a weird situation because I think I take your guys' points, and obviously they look so good in that Champions League two-legged affair against Real Madrid that they have to think we can win this. Yeah, we can beat anyone now.
Yes.
We can win this. And I know people like to talk about how Real Madrid perhaps aren't what they were, and hate is going to hate, right? That's how it goes.
Arsenal were phenomenal. There's no other way of dicing.
They
were.
Absolutely.
Real Madrid were dreadful, but you're right. Arsenal were phenomenal.
What's interesting for me is not just the close nature of the Premier League race for Champions League spots, which you talked about. It's just that Arsenal have actually been quite a lot worse this season domestically than they were last season. They got 89 points last season, and they scored 91 goals.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not trying to criticise them, but to be 30 goals and 23 points short of that with 5 games left is quite an interesting drop-off.
It is, but if you compare them to, say, another sort of a big team on the way, a big club on the way back, for example, say look at Klopp's Dortmund, I think you find that balancing excellent domestic form and making genuine progress in the Champions League at the sort of point in the arc of Arteta that they are, and I know there's different considerations, they've spent a lot more money, all that sort of stuff, it's very hard at this point in the arc to balance that, to be able to be excellent in the Champions League and produce in the Premier League. Of course, the other way of looking at that, as you're framing it, is in a season where Manchester City haven't been capable of mounting a decent title defence, unless Arsenal win the Champions League or at least get to the final, has this season got a bit of a sour taste?
Yeah, because it's the reason I say there's so much, it's difficult to judge. It's just because there's so much to unpack. Because despite what I just said there, you have to take into account their key injuries. You also have to take into account they might actually finish this season lots and lots of points lower than last season, but they might lose fewer games.
Yeah,
they lost 5 games last season. They've only lost 3 this season. They've got they've been able to, what Arsenal have been able to do quite well, I don't think it's been talked about enough, is they've been able to make themselves really tough to beat to the point where they've drawn quite a lot of games, and then it kind of depends which way you look at it. You go, okay, well, should a lot more of those draws been wins, or have they just found themselves quite tough and resilient because obviously they've not conceded many? They've got the best defence in the Premier League. So look, it's quite tough to know what to make of it. Clearly, their season will be best assessed in retrospect when we know what happens in the Champions League, right? Because it's obviously, it's kind of unthinkable now they're going to finish outside the Champions League places.
Yeah, they won't.
Because that would involve a 9-point swing, I think, from down to 6. So
and there's just so much traffic in between.
So it might well be they just need to prepare as best they can for the Champions League challenge ahead of them. But then, you've got this thing with Crystal Palace tonight. But Palace, on their day, are one of the best away teams in the league. So it's not something that that you can overlook. And I think it's also a little bit meek to lose on a Wednesday night at home to Palace to hand Liverpool the title. That just seems a little bit of an insult.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing is you talked about how strong Palace have been on the road. Of course, they've conceded 10 goals in the last 2 away games.
Yeah, I was going to say they've not been great in the last 3 games.
So they need to.
I did say on their day they're one of the best teams.
No, you're right, but I think in terms of recent, they need to stem the flow. I mean, they're both in an interesting position, Arsenal and Palace, because Palace have got a huge game at the weekend. Arsenal have got a huge game next week. So even if you take away the league context and maybe Arsenal taking a bit of pressure off themselves, as you were saying, Marcus, in terms of the Champions League race for this season, they could both do with a bit of form. They're in a weird place of wanting to avoid exerting themselves too much, but really being able to do with a result to get themselves into to Vettel.
Yeah, no, totally.
Vettel.
Yeah, I do agree, and so does Luke by the sounds of it.
Vettel. Love to hear the word.
Staying with Arsenal-y things, have you seen that former Arsenal midfielder Jack Wilshere has been named as interim Norwich City manager for the last couple of games of the Championship season, and he'll face former Arsenal teammate Aaron Ramsey on the final day of the season.
Nice, that's nice.
Yeah, I know it seems unlikely, but during that game, with them both being managers, will one of them get an injury somehow? Will they both manage to get through it?
Are you thinking of a Mailer Pardew sort of business on the touchline?
Perhaps.
Or that's Ryan Shawcross's music. He comes up the tunnel, just obliterates Ramsey's other leg.
Oh, come on.
No, I'm not saying I'd like to see it.
That's a bit bad taste.
It is bad taste.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what's bad taste.
What's that? Rex tonight?
Conceding 5 goals at home to Portsmouth and losing your job, because that's what happened to Johannes Thorup. Welcome to the Championship.
That will happen.
Yeah.
That is it, isn't it? If you, there's no way back from that.
There's something delicious about a Danish up-and-coming young coach in his 30s, done some interesting stuff in Denmark, getting awarded a big 3-year deal at Norwich. You're a big club, getting a full pre-season. Oh, this is going to be interesting. What's he going to be like? And less than a year into his 3-year deal, you lose 5-3 at home to Portsmouth. They're a fight of relegation. You're labelled an absolute prat.
Yeah, Pompey saw him off. That's what happens.
Also, Cardiff City are appallingly bad as well. So, it's an interesting situation.
Oh dear! But
Jack Wilshere's done his hard yards.
He has done
coaching.
It'd be great to see him.
I'm pleased for him to get an opportunity, because that's unfortunately in football. That's how it happens, right? You get a nod and you make your best of it. And if you really take advantage, you can find yourself having a managerial career.
I should say, everybody, that Arsenal versus Crystal Palace, of course, is tonight, and Pete and Vish will be recording Ramble Reacts straight after the final whistle. So make sure you give that a listen.
My favourite combo.
Disrespectful to the legendary Ramble Reacts combo of Luke Moore and Andy Brassel.
Yeah.
Andy Brassel.
Oh, look, everyone's got to have something to aim for, right?
I've been saying this for years. You should have more respect for yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely right. Now, gentlemen, I want to quickly go to Serie A, if I can, because the Serie A title race is incredibly hot. Unlike the Premier League, we have 2 sides that can win it, really. Both of them are on 71 points with 21 wins, 8 draws and 4 losses. That is, of course, Inter and Scott McTominay and Billy Gilmore's Napoli.
Antonio Conte's absolutely fuming at this
He always
moment.
is, Andy, so don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Come on, let's have a playoff. Because they don't do goal difference there. It's if you're on points, you're equal on points. There's no goal difference. There's no head-to-head. It's playoff time, baby.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
isn't the team with the better record and goal difference get to have the home advantage?
Yes.
That's great.
That's right. Although they have talked about, because Napoli, when they're doing well, take so many fans away from home, they've talked about, for security purposes, not having it at the San Siro and maybe having it in Rome instead.
Wow. That's mad. Napoli aren't going to be happy with that, are they?
The Romans will be looking forward to that.
Yeah, that's interesting. So basically, but we still got...
It's a relatively new rule. They've brought back this possibility.
It was there before, wasn't it?
They ditched it in the mid-noughties and then they brought it back.
But there's still 5 games to go.
Yeah, I mean, it's only happened once, apparently, in
Which tells me that it probably won't happen again.
I know.
There's so many games left.
Oh, but it'd be such fun, wouldn't
great.
it? One-off game as well. A bit like Ismian Premier.
Do you know when will they play it? Right end of the season.
Well, yeah.
No, because Inter might be in the Champions League final. So I'm just saying it could be have a variation. It could.
If there was something that makes you think,
I'm not suggesting they play it before the end of the season, Marcus.
That's what I thought.
Let's play it now.
When will they play it? After this season and before the next season? I would have thought.
What is Italy?
If you get rid of the last 5 games of the season, maybe Inter have got a better chance in the Champions League. Give them a bit of rest.
That's true. Well, Antonio Conte, you said he'd be fuming. Well, what about this, Andy? Before the transfer window, he's making his usual noises about signings and so on. And he said after their recent game, I put a lot of pressure on myself, but I also need the right weapons. Terrifying. Otherwise, it's a massacre, and I don't want to be massacred. I have paid everything back with interest, but now we will talk to the present clearly. I have to protect myself. I won't put my butt out there to be abused. I mean, my goodness, away with words the man has.
Yeah, but is any excuse to just very, very quickly mention to some of the things he actually said while he was still Spurs manager. because I remember him saying some stuff, and a couple of people I know support Spurs were like, this is essentially a resignation in public, where he said after a game where they drew 3-3 against Southampton.
Oh, that's the classic.
Yeah, he was his own players are selfish.
Yep.
And they can change the manager, but the situation cannot change because the players do not want to help each other.
Yep.
And Tottenham's story is this: 20 years there is this owner, and they never won anything.
Absolutely.
Why?
So you already had the Chiellini meme, and he thought he'd update it.
Yeah, I also think. I also like it that he said, "Until now, I tried to hide the situation." Not really. Not really.
No, I don't think so.
You know, my favourite ever Conteism came out a couple of years after it happened. So, he goes through that unbeaten season at Juventus in his first season, and they win the league. They finished 7th in the year before.
Yeah.
Of course, his opening line in the dressing room at Juventus is, "Aren't you tired of being so shit?" to the players.
Yeah.
And then just before the final game of the season, Buffon plucks up the courage to go up to him and ask him about bonuses. Bear in mind, they finished 7th the season before. They've won the title. They're unbeaten, and they're going into the last game to complete an unbeaten season. He goes, "Boss, I wondered if I could have a word about the bonuses." And he goes, "Every time you open your mouth, you're a disappointment to me."
Class. Absolute class.
It's like a proper,
So good.
vicious, abusive father.
Oh, my goodness.
It's proper, Logan Roy stuff, that, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. I reckon he growls in his sleep. Just when is he not fuming?
Yeah. It's a fuel. It's a fuel for him.
Because when he smiles, it's really weird. It's like seeing...
It's not authentic.
Yeah, when Javier Bardem is playing a bad guy.
Yeah.
And he smiles and you go, he doesn't... Oh,
He's thinking to
what is he
himself,
going to do?
I'm smiling here because it might be advantageous to me to get something out of it. That's the only reason he's smiling.
Exactly.
Yeah. There's no joy in it.
Absolutely.
It's like Mr. Beast smiling.
There you go.
I reckon two people like him, Lukaku and McTominay. Everyone else lives in fear.
Yeah.
What about Billy Gilmore? Can't hurt Billy. Little Billy?
I bet he lives in fear.
Yeah. Billy Gilmore's in fear of Antonio Conte.
Come on.
Oh, no, yeah, true. When he's not handing Scott McTominay tomatoes.
Yeah.